What's going on, folks? Thanks for hitting that download button and checking out a brand new episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, your one-stop shop for toys, tech, and talk with some assembly required. I'm your host, Rich, and if this is the first time you're checking out an episode, first of all, welcome. Thank you for lending me your attention. Second, a bit about what we do here. Toys and Tech of the Trade is an interview series where we sit down with content creators, entrepreneurs, and just great folks that are on our radar to discuss the gadgets, the gear, and the tech that they use to run their business, create content, and even be more productive. Now, when it comes to the toys aspect of the conversation, it's not relegated to the usual stuff you think of when you hear toys like action figures, Barbies, Funko Pops, Gundams, etc. We look at toys in a more general sense. So that knife collection, those are your toys. Those guitar picks that you've picked up from every concert you've attended, those are your toys. So we look at it in a more general sense. Number one, because it allows us to showcase that person's interests. But number two, even in those stories, there's commonalities about things that we all enjoy that allow the conversation to be a little bit more than just business. Of course, there's always business gems in there, but it's always cool to geek out about things that people are passionate about besides their business. Now, usually we do a little bit of housekeeping after this introduction, but I am actually going to change things up this week. We're trying to really streamline and get you folks the conversations you enjoy. This week's guest is coming to us from Noah Kagan's Underdogs group. And as always, with all of the guests that have come through the podcast from that group, they're always amazing, amazing people. A couple of takeaways from this conversation. Number one, of course, being of service, going out there, trying to make a difference, always pays dividends. If you go out there, not necessarily with the motivation to make money, money will find you. The other thing is that sometimes you got to go outside of your comfort zone to make a difference. The guest that we have this week definitely did that. Plus, there's going to be plenty of little gems and things that you can pick up to apply to your business, your entrepreneurial endeavors, and much, much more. So with that said, I'm going to stop running my mouth and I'm going to turn it over to this week's guest so you can learn about the toys and tech of their trade. Enjoy. My guest this week is fellow Noah Kagan Underdog community member, Austin Bellino. Austin is the host of Culture to Grow, which is a podcast that showcases and allows people to understand the environment in other parts of the world from a global perspective, whether it's a holiday, whether it's traditions, or anything else. Each episode is going to highlight the cultures from around the world and let you see how the other side of the world lives. In addition to that, Austin is a teacher, and we're going to be talking about his experiences as a teacher as well as his work when he was in China, plus much more, and of course, the toys and tech of his trade. Austin, what's going on, my friend?
It's going great. Thanks for inviting me here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. You have an amazing, amazing career path from being a teacher to working in China you did about 2 years over there. You were a tutor. You've worked as an ESL teacher. You've been well-traveled, and all of it under the umbrella of teaching. And I kind of want to start there. How did you get started? What made you want to become a teacher? And, why choosing to teach in another part of the world?
Yeah, the one thing that I was trying to figure out with teaching, I ended on that. I will have to say it wasn't the first choice. In high school, they tell you, pick a major, go to college, but they don't really give you the skills or the tools to pick the right one. I thought about camp counselor. Well, that's only a short part-time job in the summers. And what do I do in the fall or the winters? And then I shifted to school counselor, and we're just trying to figure out all the pros and cons. And I ended up moving to the teacher route just because I enjoyed working with students, hearing their stories, seeing when that light bulb turns on and they're like, whoa, I get it. Like, it's so cool to be alongside their journey, not doing it for them, but just kind of aiding them enough to let them explore and visit the world. That's kind of like where I got started with teaching. And then I kind of just continued to see where life took me. And that's when I went to abroad, and then it kind of shifted to more administration and now global as well.
Now, the thing about it is I want to unpack that a little further. As you said, they kind of tell you to pick a major and you go on this career path. What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were younger?
I love sports. So it was always like, I'm going to practice every day after school, and I'm like, I'm going to be a professional baseball player. And as I got older, the reality of things came into effect and said, well, Austin, you're not tall enough. You're not having about double-sized biceps. So you're going to have to need to probably change your career path. So then I kind of decided to look into anything revolving around students, either high school or elementary students, and kind of wherever the students were most passionate about learning, and just trying to find a way to give them more of a spark.
Yeah, I think that people underestimate how important it is to have a good teacher, supportive teacher, or teachers that kind of make you question what's going on in the world, because you said something very, very important that I want people to focus on, and that is the fact that we're not taught a lot of things. Even though we spend years and years and years in school, a lot of what we learn is just based on the academic side of things, and there's very minimal life preparation. But occasionally life preparation comes along courtesy of a good teacher that you have that'll say, hey, this is how the world works. This is what you have to do to be prepared. Do you feel that that's kind of been the culture in the institution of learning, that it's always, hey, we just got to get them ready to go into the world, but we got to get them ready to go into the world from an academic standpoint, and there's a disconnect in getting them ready for the life standpoint side of things?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I have a 2-year-old daughter, so I'm kind of seeing the different toys, and she has this shape sorting box where you have these different shapes going into each compartment. It seems like the education realm is just trying to jam every shape into one little slot, and it's one size fits all, but it's not the reality. Things that people have different skills, there's different experiences, backgrounds, and then regarding with money, different situations with resources. And it's just, the system is just not designed to allow everyone to find success, or also just figure out what they want to do and find that happiness. Lots of people focus on success as that dollar amount in your bank account, but it's really not the only thing in life these days.
I agree. I mean, there's physical currency, there's spiritual currency, there's mental currency. And I think that people, they get so caught up in it because we're so pushed. Like you said before, being told to choose a major. It's kind of like you go through life checking off boxes based off expectations from everybody else. It's like you go to school. Oh, what do I do after I graduate school? Well, you go to college. Okay, what do I do after I graduate college? Well, you start working. What about then? Oh, you start a family. And the thing about it is that path is not necessarily for some people, and more importantly, it's not necessarily a straight line for some people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's basically like they have these big markers, and it just reminded me of like the breadcrumbs, when you're following the breadcrumbs to the next thing. But in life, there are no breadcrumbs. They just tell you, go to A and go there. And it's like, but how do I get there? Like, let's just go. It's like, but I need some guidance, right? Where are the steps, or what is the small pieces along the way? And that's where there's a big disconnect.
So, I want to talk about your journeys to China and teaching over there. And I want to break down a little bit of how the methodology of teaching is different from here. And what were some things that you personally needed to adjust to when you embarked on that journey? Because I'm sure when you got over there, you're like, wow, this is really different, or this is something that's really different. What are some things that happened along the way that just either made you sharper when it comes to teaching, or made you really question some of what you've already learned?
Yeah, so the one thing, even just a little bit before I get to that, to give a little bit of backstory, right when I graduated, I'm from Chicago, and CPS decided to close about 49 schools. So at that point, I was kind of questioning, like, education is being closed. Like they voted on it, like 6 people voted to make this happen. And it was I was kind of questioning why, or how does this kind of environment even fit for kids and children? We're closing schools. We should be opening more.
Right.
So that kind of led me to move to China. It was kind of like a very random decision. I remember having it with my mom and saying, yeah, I'm going to China next month. And she was like, what? You're just joking, right? And it was like, no, I already put in the paperwork. I'm going. And it's like, what did you come to that decision? I just wanted to kind of see the world through the education side of things and just see how other procedures and things are done there. I have found that there are pros and cons to everywhere you go. There's always the the amazing things when I was in China, they respect educators. The students are there, well behaved. The teacher is kind of almost more important than the parent at times. But then, of course, there's the negativity side where maybe creativity lacks, where they're really focused on the test organization. There's a major test every kind of 3 months, 6 months as a mile marker. So those are kind of the negative things. But what I had to do was just make sure that I adjust to the students. They're still basic human beings. They love the same things. Like I know anime was kind of a global thing. So talking about Naruto or Dragon Ball Z with the kids, it didn't matter where they were from. They still have that basic interest of life and love. So it was good to kind of connect with them on that level.
That's a great commonality to look at, because a lot of times, and you know, there's a couple of creators, a lot of Chinese, Japanese or Korean creators that they always do like videos based on education content, but from the perspective of the parent constantly like, oh, Dad, you know, I got an A. Why wasn't it an A plus? Or I got a B. And the skit is the kid trying to figure out how to tell his parents he got a B. And it's amazing how you're on the front lines and you're like, yeah, you know, everything's very driven on tests and academics. And the thing about it is that you get so good at quote unquote test taking and academics that you forget to be good at living life.
Exactly. And the problem is with these tests, they fall in love with the subjects that they're good at. It doesn't mean that they love it and they enjoy doing it. It's just, I got 100% on the past 6 years of my academics, so this seems to be the right fit. And there's so much more out there, and it's always a major problem.
How do you balance that when you're there? Because you're looking at these students and you're seeing, you know, sparks of creativity or little things, and you're like, man, you know, if this kid really, like, if you have a kid that's an artist and you see him kind of doodling or doing things, and you're like, man, if you embarked on this, you could probably do something groundbreaking. But then you remember, like, you know, this kid can't go home and tell his parents he wants to be an artist.
Yeah, I don't want them telling me, my teacher told me to quit this and do this. So it's like, oh, wait, I didn't say all that. It's all about just kind of enforcing their interest, like confidence building. It's saying like, wow, you actually are really good. Most people that kind of do something like a doodling, they just think it's just kind of like a hobby. Nothing's really being accomplished with it. It's just kind of passing the time. But it's like, no, that's actually really good. Come check out my notebook and how I doodle. It's just a bunch of squiggly lines. So it's kind of like just making sure that you're supporting them, giving them that little bit of personal attention. 1 minute, 30 seconds, a comment could even take 5 seconds. It kind of helps them. So then it does open the door. They may follow the normal procedure, but then they'll have that minor, or they'll have that interest on the side. Maybe they become a YouTuber while they're still doing their normal day-to-day work. So I think it's just helping them try to see that they do have value outside of just the grades.
How did that work for you also with interacting with parents? Because now, you know, here you have this teacher, this foreign teacher instructing my kids. And at the end of the day, even though you're instructing based on a curriculum, there's still personal anecdotes and a way that you can make yourself relatable. Because at the end of the day, part of teaching is also teaching people about communication. So you're there, adding a little bit of spark, of your personal spark to this curriculum. How did that work for you, and how did you adapt, and did you ever get any pushback on that?
Yeah, there was definitely a struggle. Like they wanted to ask questions like, why aren't you on chapter 3 when the other teacher is already in chapter 3? Why did you not give as much homework as the other teacher as well? So we're always kind of being evaluated. Right. Like here in the U.S., parents will talk. They'll talk about the things that they like. They'll also talk about the things they don't like. So that's kind of where the comments really focused and pushed me. But at the end of the day, what I told them is I'm trying to give them a unique experience. All of these students here in the group, there's maybe 40 students in one classroom, making sure that they all get that individual push. And that is going to require them to kind of follow other paths, which might relate back in. If they're doodling and they love art, then maybe that'll help them with their art class. So always trying to kind of cater it towards the academics in the long run to kind of make the parents happy. But then with the students, just trying to encourage them to do more. Yeah.
And I think that's part of it too. I think, and this happens here in the New York City a lot sometimes, that parents look at the academic or the teachers as, you know, I hate to use the term like babysitter, but I remember when COVID started really taking root here, and, kids had to do remote learning, and parents were like, yeah, well, I have to work. How are they home? I need them to be in school. And there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of discord about that. And teachers also wanted to be safe in the same instance. When that happens, how do you look at that from an educator's perspective then, when the parent kind of leans on the educator to provide more than just instruction? In other words, like you're essentially a substitute parent, the same way you can be a substitute teacher.
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, what I see that there's a massive kind of misunderstanding with the expectations from both the parent side and also the teacher side. I mean, typically, if you read in books, parents are the child's first teacher. They see them, more time than in the classroom, the daily habits, the words that come out, either good or bad. Children are sponges. They will absorb the great things, but they'll also easily absorb those bad things as well.
Absolutely.
And then on the other side, the teachers, the parents expect the teachers to kind of take care of their child for the whole time. Like you mentioned, that babysitter mentality, which is not an ideal situation. So when the pandemic happened, it really just adjusted and really messed everything up and kind of created a lot of chaos. And I've seen a lot of kids falling behind because of that period of time. So I can't say that there's like a good, clear fix. The internet technology did help with that because they were able to at least get some kind of connection with their teacher. But a lot was lost during that period of time.
What do you feel, just to dig a little deeper, what do you feel could have been done better when that happened in terms of academics?
I think one thing would have been is just to be able to have a plan in place for something like this. I mean, you can't always foresee the future,
right?
But you can always plan for the worst. I know it does have that pessimistic mindset, but it's better to like try it on, see what failures could occur. So that, of course, it does sound like negative Nancy. They always will say as well. But it's all about preparation mode. So kind of being able to try on these different issues and just being able to act much quicker. Some things were kind of, we had the plan, but then the technology didn't work, or the students didn't have the laptops or the iPads or whatever they were using to access the classrooms. The technology was there. It was just the access to the students and the streamlined process of getting it to them was the hard part.
I've been a firm believer of the statement that in my opinion, the pandemic exposed a lot of inefficiencies in a lot of places. So what happens is, if you think about it, you'd go to work, hey, boss, manager, whatever. I think I'd like to work from home today. My kid's homesick. Oh, you can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And guess what? You had to work from home anyway. And to your point, I think that there was no action plan in place to even prepare, like, hey, what happens if we have to be in a fully remote situation? Because let's take it a step further. Sure, the pandemic side of things, you couldn't have predicted that in 100 years, but the broad strokes of, hey, what if we're in a situation where we have to do remote learning? Maybe, the streets are damaged, or there's a power infrastructure issue, or et cetera, and the kids need to be home for their safety. Like, even going that broad stroke would have given them a better understanding of how to plan than what they did. Am I correct?
Yes. And even if they just did it by, what happens if it happens on a Friday or one week, like something smaller scale. So then you can always enhance it. I remember sitting in a meeting and they were, like you mentioned there about asking your boss, and they were like, well, you know what? We have a solution now for snow days. If we have a snow day, we just throw on e-learning. I'm like, yeah, I can see the benefit on your part, but what about the students? Like, come on. So they're always like, they're looking at it from that angle. And I'm like, okay. I mean, sometimes you got to take your educator hat off and kind of be a little bit more, comforting to the students and kind of building that relationship with them.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that happened here, in New York was exactly that. There was a lot of, how's my kid going to learn? How's my kid going to get to school? This remote learning thing, this doesn't work. And then to your point, more importantly than even the systems that were being in place, some kids didn't even have the equipment. Either because, the education system didn't have money to provide it to them, or because the kids just came from households where that's just not possible, not feasible. It's like, pay the light bill, buy your kid an iPad.
Exactly. But I mean, there were some programs that went above and beyond. Schools, some curriculum, depending on the districts, I mean, did amazing work. They were able to get students up and running quickly. They provided lunches daily for kids. So there were a lot of great things alongside those kind of the negative things that usually take over on the media side of things.
Well, that's definitely part of it too. It's always easier to tell people all the bad news to make them paranoid and scared than tell them the good news. I mean, for every one kid that didn't go to school, to your point, there was, 30 kids that were learning like it was just, hey, I traded my classroom for my kitchen table.
Yeah. And I mean, everyone had to make sacrifices, adjustments, and there was some benefit, and hopefully they're able to kind of use this as a massive case study to kind of work on future things that happen that may cause issues. But we have this as a foundation, and I've seen on like even LinkedIn and job searching sites, they have that hybrid option, fully remote. So it seems like the world is adapting.
Oh, absolutely. But you know what the funny thing is? They're adapting because they don't want to lose that body, or they don't want to lose or it to affect their bottom line. And it's always crazy to me that innovation has to, unfortunately, sometimes innovation has to come from a place where somebody's pockets are being inconvenienced, and not from a place of, hey, we'd like our people to be happy, or we'd like our kids to be productive. It's like, well, like you just said, and it's funny because that happened here, and it was announced recently about the end of snow days. Like they were like, oh, there's no more snow days now with e-learning. Like it was literally in the paper. And I'm like, you guys are proud of this? This is awesome. I'm glad that you're so proud of the fact that you guys will never have snow days. But what about getting kids graduated? What about getting kids to the next grade, getting them promoted, getting them prepared for the world out there, Yeah,
it was like when I was in the meetings, they were just so happy. It was like a light bulb moment. Like, we're geniuses. And I'm like, what? Like, we're missing the big picture here.
Yep. Something interesting that when you sent me your bio, you were talking about, getting your degree at the time of, the mass school closings. And the thing about it is that the education system now, you're learning not only to have to adapt to the real world, but obviously the safety constraints that come with learning now, obviously with the rises of violence in schools. When you were teaching in China, how did they prepare, or how were they adjusted for that? And the reason I asked this question is because I've noticed that with the advances in technology, the advances of young kids being prone to mental illness or just getting into these dark places is just staggeringly more out there. Or let me rephrase that. It's being reported more frequently.
Yeah. I mean, with all the technology issues and the less opportunities to interact with peers or teachers or just human beings due to the pandemic, it kind of shifted the focus. Overseas, there's definitely more issues in regards to mental health. The problem is sometimes it's overlooked. It's, you're just not sleeping right, so just get a good night's sleep tomorrow and you'll be back on track. The support overseas is not necessarily as built up as it is here in the U.S. with all the different programs, the additional counselors that may focus on that mental health, social emotional learning, all of these kind of components. So they're still gaining traction. It is growing, at least. The problem is becoming more and more popular. Students are talking about it. Clubs, which I'd love to see the students doing the activity. They're creating the club. They're bringing it to the schools, which is always something I try to encourage and push. It does get into tricky because it does link to a little bit of politics, and it's how you don't want to talk about politics. That's right. When you grew up in the U.S. That's a one thing you don't talk about at the dinner table. So it's hard to sometimes everything is twined in when you're working with different cultures. So just kind of talking about more of the emotional, the self interest is the main thing that I try to focus on to help them in that regards.
How are mental health initiatives for students were you taught? How was that something that, hey, if you see something, say something? Like how were you I don't want to say conditioned to approach that, but how would you adapt to that if you notice, like, hey, a kid was having difficulty at home? Or were there things you personally look for, like red flags, markers? And if so, how would you work towards helping to remedy the situation? Because again, like you said, there's that fine line of, educator and secondary parent. And then there's the line of just being a good human being. Like, listen, I noticed this kid is having troubles at home. How do I what can I do to help him or her?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing I kind of would focus on is, because I am the foreigner, I can't overstep my boundaries. I'm technically a guest in this home country. And basically what I would do is observe. I would kind of figure out, where is the root problem? Is it seems that there's some type of family issues? Is it students bullying? Is it academic issues? And once I'm able to kind of like isolate, and even if I'm just asking very general questions, like, what did you do on the weekend? Or how did you spend time with your parents? And getting a very quick response and seeing, was it full in detail or was it just one sentence? And then that kind of helped me get a feel of what needed to be done. Sometimes you can loop in the teachers, the principals. What happens is, if you bring it to that next level, you're sounding the alarm. And then what's happening is you're throwing the spotlight on that kid that didn't want the spotlight. That's exactly what he didn't want. So it's kind of navigate what the student needs, and then also what is the best approach to help the student.
As an educator, obviously, and you mentioned it briefly just now, you mentioned bullying, and obviously bullying is a universal, unfortunate, stigma that's everywhere. And obviously it comes in different flavors and colors, so to speak. How were you handling those instances over there? And what made you, what was things that you thought about differently with regards to how those instances happened there versus here?
This is kind of where the spark actually came for my project, Culture to Grow. Everyone always can see the differences. They're basically there on the top, the surface. And society celebrates differences, which is super important. But sometimes we overlook like identifying what those similarities are between us. And because if you find out someone speaks the same language or interested in the same language, you can really break down that cultural barrier pretty quickly. Anime, sports, soccer worldwide is extremely popular. Someone likes Manchester United. Maybe another person in a completely different part of the world likes them as well. Boom, they have a connection. That cultural barrier, those issues break down. So whenever I would see any bullying or issues when I was overseas, it was always trying to find a common connection between the students to bring them together. And I can even kind of set it up. Hey, Johnny, I know that you like this. And the other kids may not have even known that. And then you slowly can build that connection. Video games are actually another great way as well. Now with the youth, more and more video games are becoming popular. So kind of highlighting that aspect as well. Teachers have to know what's going on in the children's lives. You can't just assume you know everything and not care about it. You need to know what the latest game is. What's the popular movie out? You got to kind of know the interest of your students. Super important.
I agree. I think that, and I've been seeing it lately with people who I'm friendly with, that they're doing more esports and video game curriculums and tailoring them around those interests, because they're realizing that there's an underrepresented community of individuals who really want to be in that space and just have never had the opportunities to really flourish in that space. And I think that seeing that and what you just said, you have to think a little bit outside of the box with teaching, especially because you're literally fighting for attention. You're fighting it with the phone, you're fighting with streaming, you're fighting with video games, you're fighting with everything else. So you're constantly having to up your game. So with that said, how were you making yourself different when it came to your students? Was it like, oh, Mr. Bellino's the cool teacher, or Mr. Bellino knows about video games, or I could talk to him about sports? Like, what were things when you started teaching abroad that you said, these are great things that are going to help me stand out?
Yeah, I mean, as a teacher, we're always taught never become their friends, because then you lose that, if they start doing their homework, then you're going to have a major issue. But then I was also raised that video games are bad. They create lazy people. They're against the education system. Right. If you're playing video games, you're not studying.
Yep.
Like, doesn't work that way anymore. I mean, now video games can be a great source of education, collaboration with teamwork. It has so many benefits. So it's just basically trying to figure out, identifying each student's interest, giving them the time, that personalized time. And because class sizes are relatively bigger there. I think the smallest class size I had was about 35 students per class. Wow. And it went all the way up to 60.
Ooh.
So as a teacher, I mean, some don't even know all of the names of their students. So it's like, simple thing, get the names down. If you need to create a seating chart to help you memorize them, knowing names is extremely important, and just a small thing that I recommend everyone to do. Just be aware of names and try to remember them. Write them down if you have to, and it might be silly, but it will help later on. So just kind of little things like that. It just, everything just kind of focuses on that individual person. It's not the group mentality. It's not self-interest of myself. Well, it's too hard. There's too many students. I could never do it. Well, the ideas that you have now can't do it, but there's something out there, some solution that might help. So go figure it out.
You mentioned that you had met your wife when you were in China as well. And it's interesting because obviously cultural shift and a lot of, obviously the language barrier, you learned obviously how to speak Chinese when you were there. How did that come about? What was, how did you meet your wife when you were over there?
Well, we actually met through online dating websites. So it's a global thing. Everyone's doing it. Maybe not always the best route. But it did work out for us with being two working, busy individuals. The online option was the best. But we did meet. And actually, a quick story, not to kind of go into too much of a tangent. Our first date was actually in China. They have these parks where the grandparents or the parents will basically write kind of like a profile or a top 5 list of their child and trying to be matchmakers. So my first interaction with my wife was she was actually talking with a person saying, look, he's American. He has a good job, money, and trying to set me up. And I was like, what's going on? This is the weirdest date ever. Like, man, he's trying to set me up, but another person, and I'm on a date. And then we just kind of ended up working things out, and now we're happily married for now 5 years and have a 2-year-old daughter. So it's been a great adventure. No, I think I wanted to touch on that because obviously you're dating in another country, and the cultural differences, the approach to, and I say it in quotes, to the game of dating is completely different. Like you just said, you're over there and you're like, you're trying to set me up with somebody else. Like, what's happening? It's very different. And a lot of people may be like, that's interesting. And it leads me into the work that you're doing with your podcast, because your podcast is exactly that. You're showcasing differences, but in a way that you're making them a way to build a bridge between different people. Like you touched on first day of school traditions in your last episode, and that's universal. Everyone goes to school. Everyone does something with their kids the first day, whether it's making your kid take the picture with the sign, which I'm guilty of, or something else. So I want to talk about that because I want to get into what inspired you to start this podcast and explore this particular outlet, because this is incredibly unique. Yeah, I mean, most people, they are, if it's anything about the world or the globe, they're looking for travel destinations. And that's basically, the list is quite thin. They're looking for safety. So then maybe a bunch of countries are just completely removed from their list, their bucket list, or also as well, like beaches. So then any of those landlocked countries might be thrown out as well. So it's just kind of like the common way to research or learn about other places around the world. It's just through travel. Maybe a documentary, maybe a TV show is aired there and they find out, oh, wow, the Lord of the Rings was there. But beyond that, they don't ever really try to learn about the culture, learn about the people. And then with media will basically push the political side of things, which then will make the people just be the same as the politics. But when I was in China, and I remember when I came back the first time from living in China, they're asking me questions like, the Communist Party, are they watching you? Like, is there cameras in your home? Like, I'm like, no, like, I didn't even really feel it. I felt like I was more free there. Like, I don't know. And they just had these assumptions. And it's like, what about the people? Like, are they really proud of their country? I'm like, well, yeah, just like any country, they do love their country and they're happy, but they're still normal people. So just trying to find a way to just, I don't know, there's myths, stereotypes, biases, and even just like misinformation. You got to unlearn things and just relearn some things at times.
I think that's a big elephant in the room, that with people that we're conditioned to kind of focus on that. I tell people all the time, and I say it and it's almost cliched. I go, listen, you go in a room full of kids, different races, different nationalities, different places. You put them in a room, you drop a bucket full of toys in that room. All the kids are going to play together. And the thing about it is, there's no, where are you from? Who are you? It's, hey, look at these blocks, or hey, look at these G.I. Joes, or hey, look at this, because like you were saying before, like anime things, it's universal. It's kind of, and I hate to say this, it's like, listen, kids are a blank canvas, and parents are the ones that kind of paint that canvas, and sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse.
Exactly. And I mean, and that's where I love where the world or the U.S. is going. We are celebrating differences, but at sometimes it's 1 month is dedicated to this, and then we move on, and then we move on. And it's, why can't we get everyone together, share all of our differences together, celebrate, learn from each other, and get that commonality. Of course, celebrating is very important, but then also just trying to figure out where those lines connect. And it's like, whoa, I had no idea you're doing that, or you have that same issue. If you got two people working on it, they always say if you want to do it alone, it's faster. But if you want to do it with a group of people, you can usually go much further. So it's just that mindset needs to shift a little bit.
No, I agree. And I think that one of the scary things with that, especially, in our current climate, is exactly that. There's celebration of individuality, but the problem is that within those celebrations of individuality, there's not much more to drive forth unity. Like, I remember when I was a kid and they celebrated, I believe they did it for Kwanzaa. And I remember we had a teacher and she kind of did like a lesson about it. Like, she was like, hey, these are what the candles are for. This is what this is for. This is what it represents. And the thing about it was that even though here I am, 42 years old, to having this conversation with you, I remember that. And you're learning about it. And it's like, hey, people celebrate this holiday. This is what they do. And people will be like, how do you know that? And it's like, because it's just something, something that you were informed about, you were taught. And I think that that's where we kind of lose sight of this stuff, because, hey, let's celebrate this holiday. But do you even know what this holiday is? Like, hey, let's celebrate the Eid. Okay, that's great. What is it? Is somebody telling the kids about it? Is anybody telling the kids, hey, your classmate is fasting? Like, don't offer him a donut. Like there's that fine line of, hey, we're going to give you this because obviously we want to help everybody feel represented, but we're not giving people the whys or the how to understand them.
Exactly. I mean, when you said the donut, most kids are like, oh, they're rejecting this donut. They don't like donuts. Like,
yep.
Oh, this person's weird.
Yep.
No, there's a whole nother layer behind it. He or she loves donuts, wants to eat it, but can't.
Right.
So it's kind of such a struggle. And I think and that's always what teachers have these days. It's the curriculum. Like, well, you're teaching kids this, you're teaching kids that. And even something like you mentioned there, learning about holidays or different things could create kind of criticism, could create commotion, fight, pushback. And they're just kind of seeing that instant, like, this is how it's impacting our children, our students. But long term, like, you remember it now. Like, and if you met someone that celebrated, then you can have that simple conversation and the barrier is broken, and then you can have a really good connection with that person. So it's just the value is focused on that instant rather than the long term.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there was a big discussion recently about sexual orientation with children, and people were like, oh, should parents, should this be taught, not taught? And I'm not going to get into the political ramifications of that, but I say this. Instead of focusing on my kid should or shouldn't learn this, how about let's learn about the basic tenet of just being a better human? Meaning, like, hey, if a student says, like, hey, I have, 2 dads, like, instead of focusing on he has 2 dads, you should focus on, hey, that's cool. What are they both like? You know what I mean? Like, just broad strokes, being a better human. And I feel that sometimes that gets lost, to your point, in just the intricacies of the institution of learning, where people will sit there and they'll go, hey, don't teach my kid this. And I said, okay, that's great. That's awesome. I agree. Don't teach my kid this, but just teach them how to understand it at minimum, so that your kid, guess what, can go home and educate the parent. Hey, mom, hey, dad, like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, kids can be teachers for their parents. Like,
1,000%.
Parents. Yeah.
1,000%. Listen, my daughter's going to turn 4, and I'm learning from her all the time. And more importantly, I'm learning how to just be exactly what I always joke, like what I said, and I say jokingly, like being a better human, because, kids are just, they're the most honest and the most wholesome of us. And then as time progresses, obviously that changes, but hey, Dad, why don't you like that? Why'd you get mad that guy cut you off? And then you're like, yeah, why did I get that mad? And it makes you question, like, what the hell are you doing,
Exactly. Yeah. They have no filters. They will say it as directly as needed. And sometimes it's like, yeah, I should reconsider that.
Yep.
And when you were talking about how being a better human being and everything, and I saw in the news, Kanye West was talking about Friends. He said, Friends isn't funny. And this kind of triggered the next thing, was because a lot of people that I meet around the world they need English. So how do they learn English? They learn English by watching Friends.
Yep.
Well, I'm kind of like, I enjoyed Friends, of course, but I'm not a big fan of it because they will constantly rewatch it. They'll just watch it multiple times and that's all they're there. And I'm like, that's not what society looks like. Like,
no.
We'll check out Modern Family, where you have, 2 dads, you have maybe an older gentleman and a younger woman married. It's like, there's so many different dynamics now. That traditional boyfriend, girlfriend, friends environment, it's not reality. So go see other things. Don't just get stuck in that one bubble.
I mean, listen, I remember, like people always were big into Seinfeld, and I was like, I could give a damn less about it. And I remember there was one episode and there was like the whole big controversy about the Puerto Rican Day Parade and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, listen, everybody's upset about it. But the thing about it is that this show, the microcosm of this show, is completely removed in some respects to what New York is really like. Going back to what you were saying with Friends, it's the same thing. It's like, listen, like, I remember somebody was like, you didn't really see any minorities on Friends. And I'm like, it took you 10 years to figure that out, like things like that. Like people are just, hey, how do you not see? That was a big thing with when they brought back Sex and the City, and they were just like, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna represent this. And I'm like, yeah, that's great and all, but what is it doing? What is it changing? Yeah. Nothing. It's like, hey, we're just showing you what New York is really like, or we're showing you what Chicago is really like. And it's like, yeah, that's awesome. Like my wife, she watches, One Chicago. So, Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, etc. So you watch it and I'm like, man, there's a lot of stuff going on over there. And, you get this preconceived notion about it, but it's like, that's not it. You're getting what the television show is painting, but it's not 100% accurate either.
Exactly. And that's why with my podcast, I try to interview people that are there, either high school students, college students, freshly graduated individuals, where they have that mindset. But at the same time, this is one person. This is not the whole country. This is their individual traditions, culture. They're giving a little bit of a bigger perspective. But you and I, being from different places, we have similarities, but of course there's some differences. Chicago pizza is always the best in the U.S. So there's little subtle things like that.
See, that's a good one. Now in a perfect world, I would say Chicago pizza is lasagna, but that doesn't mean that's the funny part. And this is where people get hung up. It's like, listen, it's flour, cheese, and sauce. It's the preparation that's different. But at the end of the day, I tell people all the time, and they laugh. I go, listen, you buy pasta, unless the pasta's made fresh and it's made fresh, you could be eating a box of Ronzoni for $60. And you don't know it. Think about it. If you go to a store and you see all these pastas, and you bring them home, unless you're culturally around pasta, you're not going to know that that's Bertolli or that's Ronzoni or that's the dollar store brand. You're not going to know.
Yeah. The only thing is overcooked or undercooked.
Yeah. That's a tenet that, you'll know that immediately. But in terms of the ingredients, it's like, listen, unless you're certifiable in that, because like I said, it's a cultural thing, you'd know, like, this is box pasta. But otherwise, you're not going to know. Like, I always laugh. People they'll buy a chicken Parmesan dish. They'll pay $30 for it. And it's like, listen, that breaded chicken, do you know it's breaded chicken, or do you know that somebody actually breaded, or is it a bag of breaded chicken that came out of a freezer that got some sauce poured on it that now tastes better because the sauce was homemade?
Yeah, I'm glad you're telling me this now because we got our 5-year anniversary coming up in October. So maybe I can convince her to do something simple at home. We're paying $60 for this. We don't need it. It could be just a box or something. So
that's the whole thing. Like if somebody says, "Hey, our pasta's fresh made," like the difference because they'll bring it out to you. It's going to have a different texture. It's going to be like you'll know. But when you go to I always laugh. People go to the Olive Garden or they'll go to some of these other places, and I go, listen, man, it could just be a box of industrial sized macaroni back there that's getting boiled and getting some seasoning thrown on it, and it's coming out. Then you're paying $30 for it.
Yeah, a big, massive box and a big bowl. You're just kind of constantly adding it to it. But
there you go.
That's definitely what it is.
So I want to switch gears a little bit and go into what we like to call the hot seat. It's a series of rapid fire questions based on some of our conversation. Some of it's obviously business related. Some of it is trade related. Some of it is toys related, just to add a little bit of a human element. So I want to kind of start with more so how you operate as an educator. And when you're getting ready to teach for the year, what's a typical day for you like?
So in regards to just the teaching component and getting ready to making sure that you got the kind of the headline or the theme created for the year, and everyone wants to make sure that you have kind of like a purpose, a mission. Even at those younger ages, you need to make sure that there's a goal set and the students understand what that goal is early. So there's lots of quotes and captions and amazing bulletin boards you can do. So I think just kind of having that, and it's a constant reminder throughout the year that they can look at to kind of know that they need to refocus at times or just know where that mission is for that either term or year. It's very important.
How do you structure your lessons? Do you spec them out in Microsoft Word, or do you kind of just take notes throughout the year as you start preparing for the following year? What's your process like in terms of just building your own approach to the curriculum?
Yeah, it's usually through Microsoft Word. And basically what I'll do is I have a lot already created, and then I'm always, before the year starts, kind of checking it, adding to it, remembering, making notes when I can. The comments are always amazing to kind of say, hey, this didn't work, fix it next year. So then it will kind of remind me. Things go on so quickly. I mean, the year goes quickly. Teachers get burned out. So it's a good time in the summer to just kind of look back at it and kind of a refresh reminder, hey, this didn't work, fix it. So then you're have an easier year the next time. It just constantly improving is the goal. Asking questions from other educators. What are you doing? What worked? What didn't work? Everyone wants to talk about the success stories, but it's those mistakes is the most valuable, I believe.
How do you decompress after a day of teaching?
The most thing is with my daughter. I mean, just playing with her. She's 2 years old, still in that exploration phase. Kind of everything is new to her, so just kind of watching her, and we kind of laugh about random things. Most recent was we put a balloon kind of in the back, tied it to our pants, and running around like we have a tail. And just seeing the laughter coming from that simple, silly thing, it's just like, okay, life is still amazing. So it just kind of has to remind me of these little small activities.
Do you bring your own computer with you into the classroom?
Yeah, so I have a MacBook Air, and all of the information is there. And then we're kind of connected with the Google platform, so the Drive has all of the resources. If the internet ever goes down, it gets chaotic in the teacher's world.
Oh man, really? So what do you do when that happens? How do you adapt?
You try to do the best you can. You troubleshoot. You basically throw out your whole lesson plan. Nowadays, most of it is connected technology. Go back to the roots. Most likely the book will have some type of activities. Try to figure out what you're talking about and kind of maybe do like kind of magnifying glass, go in a little bit deeper rather than kind of just focusing on the surface. It's just finding the best way to pivot and not really letting the students know that this was not the plan. Just kind of keep it going. The flow has to keep moving or disruption will happen and that'll snowball and then it's all out of control.
It's not the old, here comes the black cart with the TV.
Yeah. TV time. I remember that rolling down. You can hear it from a couple classrooms away when it's coming down.
Absolutely. What's the first place you go to when you open your phone?
The first place I would open is this. I'm not sure if I can talk about apps, but it's an app called Hello Talk, which is basically my instant connection to the world. The app basically brings language learners together, and everyone has learned different language. And then that's where I can learn about different cultures. There's a lot of languages in the world, so it's not necessarily the best to just dive into many of them at the same time, but it's great to just kind of meet different people around the world and learn about the cultures that they have.
What were 3 mobile apps you couldn't live without when you were teaching abroad?
3 mobile apps. Well, the main thing when I was abroad, most of the apps are not accessible. I would probably have to say the communication side of things, like either a messenger system to make sure I can communicate back home with parents would definitely be one. I had like a sports app. Being from Chicago, we love sports, part of the culture. So being aware of the sports, just because the time zones are just completely off, I couldn't watch them live or really know what was going on. And then I would also say probably anything related to news. There are a couple different news apps just so that I'm aware of what's going on back at home. And then, of course, where I am, just to be kind of aware if things are changing or things to kind of just keep notice, not really necessarily act on, but just be aware so that the safety piece is important.
There you go. What's a favorite piece of tech besides your phone or computer?
Favorite piece of tech would have to be... I got to go old school here. I got the coffee maker. Like, that is such a essential part of my life. It gives me that boost. You need to have energy every day when I go into work. You need to just be able to kind of put aside whatever issues or a lack of sleep the night before. It just get ready to go. And that coffee can always kind of overcome anything with a little bit of a boost. Are
you a Keurig pods person or like old school percolator?
Old school. Just with the coffee grounds, and then if I want to really step it up, I'll get the fresh beans and then kind of do that whole process myself. But
nice.
The simplicity is always the nice. The pod works, but sometimes you just miss the whole process. Is always sometimes gives me a sense of tranquility.
Yeah, I don't drink hot coffee, but I like cold brew coffee. So I like to grind my own beans. Same thing. Put it in, let it steep. So. Definitely a big fan of just that old school, just picking the beans, knowing what you're going to get. It never gets old.
Oh, yeah.
What was the last thing you looked up on YouTube?
Last thing I looked up on YouTube. One thing that I'm trying to figure out a lot of is anything related to leadership. So although I'm, working with students on a daily basis, it's still... I don't necessarily feel like a leader. Like, they're not my troops. They're not like directly under me. So just trying to learn, like, how do you lead other people that rely on you, or you are the boss of them? Students, it's kind of like the teacher does have the hierarchy, but they're still almost equal with the parents behind them. So I'm just trying to learn the different strategies of how to lead.
What was something you purchased recently that is less than $100 and it's made your life easier or just more enjoyable?
I would have to say it's the 5-minute journal. I think it was around like $29 or maybe $20. And this was amazing because I hear all these people around me, they're journaling, they're taking the time to write this out. And I'm sitting there thinking, I can't sit at a table for an hour with my screaming daughter running around. So the 5-minute journal was great. It's like, it literally takes 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night. And it's very simple, and it kind of allows me to keep pace with my goals and kind of also highlight those success things that lots of people will overlook as they're just like, what's next? What's next? You don't get to kind of celebrate the small victories in life.
Has journaling made you a better operator, so to speak?
Yes, it has it helped me be more realistic. I've realized the goals, and then at the end of the day, I would say, did I accomplish the goal? No. So then I realized I have to modify the goals to make them realistic. Have that big goal at the end, but find smaller things that you can do in the day to accomplish it rather than kind of forcing myself to basically fail. Like, if you set the goal too high and you fail, it just kind of puts you in a very kind of a down spiral mindset. So I really learned to just have smaller goals and just track the progress. It's good for the momentum.
I agree. I think that people sometimes they create this larger narrative, and I go, listen, stop moving the goalposts. Like when you watch football, it's like, listen, it's a game of inches. There's a first down as you make your way across the field. I think that people should look at life the same way. It's like, listen, here's a first down. Like, hey, I did this, great. Here's the next thing. Oh, I got another first down until they get to that goal. I am fully in agreement with that. What was the last book you read?
The last book I read, I'm trying to catch up. I basically became a reader after college. So there's all these books that I'm kind of far behind, and the list is always growing. And this is still kind of tied to leadership. It's the 7 habits of a successful person, I believe.
Highly effective people. Yep.
Highly effective people. There we go. And that was the book. And everyone has constantly said it's such a great book. And it's been on the list for a long time. So I finally got a chance to read it. And it was very eye-opening to kind of help me realize my own habits. Sometimes you're not aware of the things you do on a daily basis. We're creature of habits, sometimes for good, but sometimes also for bad.
What was the last TV show you watched?
Right now, I have to say the Lord of the Rings new Ring of Power. I love Lord of the Rings. I love that medieval swords magic component, and it's back. And then House of Dragons is on as well. So it's like a Friday, Sunday is like, whoa. And then Saturday, I can kind of rest and relax a bit.
Nice. What was your favorite toy when you were a kid?
I'm going to probably have to give you 2 if that's all right.
Please.
The one thing was, in life, what I've noticed now with a young child, everything is bigger and you want the bigger items and it's better. And I love growing up micro machines with those little small cars or the small tanks. And it was just kind of cool to use that imagination. And then on every Christmas list to Santa was, of course, Legos. And I've been able to kind of still love Legos, and I've kind of shifted it to kind of add to what I do. So I have last year I bought the DEI Lego set with shows the representation of different people. And this year I got the globe. So I'm trying to, still love that passion, but tie it to what I do.
It's funny. They actually brought back micro machines. I was at Toy Fair before the pandemic happened, and there was a big push. They had brought back micro machines. They actually had the big car carrier that they used to do that would fold, and you could put all the micro machines in it.
Oh, yes. I didn't know it was back. I haven't been seeing anything really too much in the local Targets or Walmarts. So I didn't know if it was all right.
Yeah. Wow. So, figure you want to share that with the little one down the road. Obviously, at 2, you don't want her to eat it, but
Yeah. Well, I kind of say don't eat it, lesson learned, and just kind of go with it, because I think it's such a great thing to play with.
Absolutely. Who is your favorite content creator?
Content creator. Because I'm part of the Underdogs, should I say Noah Kagan would probably be the top. He kind of introduced me to this realm of Underdogs that have supported me along this journey. It's very hard to kind of do multiple tasks at once, but with all of the support and experiences from all of you, it made the process much easier.
What brought you to Noah's content?
Just the passion to kind of expand and kind of know that there's other opportunities out there, different techniques to approach it. He's done a lot of different things, and I know he's working on maybe different routes with either YouTube content or different topics constantly. So just always trying to use those refreshing ideas is great.
What is something you've changed your mind on in the last 12 months?
Changed my mind on in the last 12 months. Probably has to do with, because I am in, my wife is from China, so we have those cultural differences constantly. And I probably the biggest thing is actually drinking hot water in the summer months when I'm sick. I was always against that. I was always like, I'm not drinking hot water in the summer. But she's kind of constantly pushed it on there. And I realized it does have a slight benefit. So I was able to change my mind on that. That's kind of a cultural piece. And she's happy as well with that.
That's pretty good. What is a business milestone that you're proud of?
Business milestone would probably be, I held the Global Cultural Peer Exchange, which brought students from 25 different countries together into a Zoom event. And that was pretty amazing, because just having students from all these different places, just talking casually, building connections really helped, the world. And that, even that little small piece of those kids involved. And then some of them were able to kind of connect through Instagram and other social media channels and kind of took it further beyond just my event. So I think that's probably the most successful business thing that I've done recently.
What's a myth that you try to dispel when you're an educator?
The main thing is that there's not one way to accomplish the goal. Lots of people are set in stone saying my way is the best. But in reality, there's lots of different shortcuts or different methods or styles that may actually be better due to either your learning experience, if you're auditory or visual learner, or however style it is. It's just always constantly seek ways to enhance your tool belt, you can say.
What's something you splurge on when it comes to business and personal development?
Splurge on would probably have to be Probably, actually, one thing would be probably like books about different cultural pieces, cultures around the world, how to interact with culture, global citizenship, anything related to the world, and kind of blending them together, kind of like identifying the pros and cons, and kind of seeing it all in one book is always nice. It's hard to sometimes Google, and the web has just so many different links or options you can go to. So when the book brings everything together, it makes my life a little bit easier.
Nice. What is a piece of career advice you would tell your younger self?
The main advice that I would probably tell myself is just try and ask. You never know what the outcome is. Lots of times I kind of already imagine the rejection in my head, so then it kind of deters me from even asking. But I've learned that if you just ask, you might actually get something that you were very shocked to get. So purely just ask is very important.
How do you handle failure?
I take a few minutes to definitely kind of let it soak in. And then I realize that it's the game of probability. The more times you ask, the more times you do it, the odds of you succeeding is going to go up. So I kind of just focus on that math side of things. I don't like math at all, but probability is something that has stuck with me.
What's a piece of personal or business advice you've received over the years that always resonates with you?
Career advice that resonates with me. I mean, one piece would just be the consistency, 1 foot forward every day. Life will throw obstacles. They'll push you back. They'll maybe force you to want to quit and give up. And it's just keep getting through and pushing through. Because it's just the success doesn't come instantly. You may not see success until a year later, 5 years later. So you just gotta have to keep doing it and keep modifying and putting the content or whatever you're doing out there.
What is something that brings a smile to your face?
So on the face, probably anything, probably with my daughter when she's exploring new things. She's kind of opening different things. We watched, with football being back, we watched Thursday Night Football together, and just hearing her say football, like it was a great thing. It's like, I'm kind of showing her my interest, and I didn't necessarily teach her that, but she's kind of probably watching me. I'm mirroring all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the best.
That is an amazing feeling. Besides watching Thursday Night Football, what else do you watch with her?
Usually we kind of break it into her time and my time for TV, and it's kind of the repeat. Right now, she's in that age of Cocomelon.
Yep.
Which is I enjoy, but it is on repeat. So after this time, it's like, oh, can we change it to something else? So Sesame Street is a good adjustment, and Peppa Pig is popular right now for her as well.
Wow. Yeah, my daughter went through the Peppa phase. She is now in the Bluey phase.
I feel like it changes very quickly. Like it'll be like, nope, done. Next, it's like, what? You love this for 2 months? Like what?
Yep. I know. I have a Peppa Mall and a bunch of Peppa toys. Oh, I know.
Now I just sit in the corner.
Yep. Now they're just sitting in the corner. But the beauty of it is this wonderful thing called eBay. So I go, all right, let's do a purge and start putting stuff on eBay. And that way, I always joke about sell your drugs to buy more drugs. It's like, all right, we'll sell all this stuff and then we'll get you some other stuff.
Hopefully you don't tell her, it's at another home, or I don't know if she would be allowing you to just sell off her toys.
Well, you know what's happening too? Then she's getting into the stuff we watch. So like she's, we started watching He-Man. So they brought back like the toys. So I got her like He-Man and Skeletor, and she did a show and tell, and they're like, oh, what's your favorite toy? And she's like, this is Skeletor, and all these. And it's funny because like the teachers are like similar age to me, and they're all laughing. And they're like, oh, who taught you about Skeletor? My dad.
That's such a great thing. It's like, oh, great. The next parent-teacher conference will be a great conversation.
Absolutely. So now that we've kind of run that, there's one thing I always like to do, which is reach one, teach one. And I kind of structure it based on different conversations we've had with a guest throughout the episode. So in your case, being an academic, you're being asked to give a commencement speech to high school seniors to prepare them for the world. What's one piece of lasting advice you'd give them to wrap up the speech?
So I guess the main piece would definitely be something related to, although you if it's for high school, so you graduated from high school, all 4 years of the curriculum, you've done grammar school, middle school, you've been given all this curriculum from books and resources, however the teacher kind of prepared it. But know that there's still information out there that the teachers are not experts on or know exists. So you have to go out on your own to go learn and discover the world, kind of test those theories, those dates, those anything that you learn, like go out in the world and test it. Go, if you're talking about something with history, go to those locations and put your foot on the soil of where that happened and talk to the people. Like, go and discover it for yourself. Don't just assume that all the information that's passed down to you is accurate. Even that could be filled with biases or issues or changes. So just go out and learn on your own.
Outstanding. Austin, where can people find your work and how to connect with you?
So the main place is if you can search Culture to Grow from any major podcasting app or location. And then the best route would be through LinkedIn. You can kind of connect with me if you're interested to learn more about the world or just talk about anything. I'm up for a great chat.
Awesome. Links to everything Austin and I discussed will be in the show notes for this episode. Austin, thank you so much for taking the time to share the toys and tech of your trade.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
I always enjoy showcasing all of the great, talented folks from the Underdog community. There's so many more folks whose stories I cannot wait to share with all of you. Everything Austin and I discussed in this conversation will be linked in the show notes. As always, full disclosure, some of those items may contain affiliate links, which if you click any, we will receive a small commission, which of course goes towards making this and everything else from RageWorks better for you, the listener. As always, calls to action. If you want to keep up with RageWorks, you can find us everywhere. You can also find the RageWorks Podcast Network if you want to strictly keep up with our podcast work on Twitter and Instagram. Just put in RageWorks Podcast Network and you will find us there. If you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, shoot me an email, rich@rageworks.net, or visit our website, rageworkspodcastnetwork.com or rageworksnetwork.com, and feel free to fill out the contact form, enter your information there, and we will get back to you as soon as possible and set up a conversation. Last but not least, as always, thank you guys for all of your attention, all of your support. By the time this podcast comes out, if you are in the New York area, there will be a podcasting networking event that I will be speaking at on October 9th. So by the time you hear this, it would be the following weekend. I'll be there talking about running the RageWorks Podcast Network and doing just more things to make the space better. So if you're in the New York area or even in the tri-state area and are interested in checking it out, leveling up your podcasting game, or hell, if you need somebody to help you launch a podcast, then let me help you and let the RageWorks Podcast Network be the conduit to get your message out to the masses. We're always looking to work with great and talented individuals and also share amazing shows with our audience. So whether you're looking for a network partner that can give you the exposure you need to get your message out there, or you're looking for somebody to take over all of the heavy lifting, editing, distributing, all of the fun stuff that people don't want to do with a podcast, let us help you. I'm going to put a link for the event in the show notes for this episode. I am also going to include a promo code so that if you are interested in attending, you can get a ticket for zilch. Free. Nada. But again, we're going to just put that in the show notes for this episode. So if you are someone who does read the show notes and are in New York City and would like to attend, definitely look for the promo code there. And I look forward to seeing you if you do attend. Would love to meet more people face to face, especially as the world slowly becomes a more face to face kind of place. With that said, thank you all for listening to this week's episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade. Make sure, as I said, to check the show notes for links to everything Austin and I discussed. And if you want to connect with Austin as well or be a guest on his podcast, we will include that too. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Peace. Toys and Tech of the Trade is part of the RageWorks podcast network, your source for rants about gaming, entertainment, and the works. Visit us at RageWorksNetwork.com.